can always tell who a person really is, not by how they act when everything's calm, but by how they respond in a showdown. See, showdowns aren't just conflicts, they're classrooms. They reveal your maturity, your mindset, your mastery of self. And the truth is, most people don't lose because they were wrong. They lose because they didn't know how to handle being right. Today, I want to talk about something we don't discuss enough. Showdown etiquette. The art of standing firm without losing grace, of defending your truth without forfeiting your peace. When we talk about power, most people think of dominance, the ability to control, to win, to have the last word. But true power doesn't need to prove itself. It doesn't roar to be heard. It doesn't flex to be seen. Power that is real is rooted, not reactive. It stands tall even when it's silent. It knows that confidence and composure can do what confrontation and chaos never will. When you understand this, you realize that the most powerful version of you is the one who no longer needs to poison your power with ego. When you find yourself in a showdown, whether that's a disagreement, a betrayal, a business conflict, or even a relational standoff, everything in you wants to react. It's human. Your emotions rise up to defend your worth. You want to be understood, to be right, to not let anyone play with your name. But that's where the danger lies. Because if you let your emotions take the wheel, they'll drive you to a place your character can't sustain. Power without discipline turns toxic. Power with poison becomes manipulation, not mastery. The greatest test of your strength is not how loud you can get, but how still you can remain when someone tries to shake you. That's when you discover the difference between presence and performance. Presence says, I know who I am, so I don't have to prove it. Performance says, I'm not sure who I am, so I need you to see me. When your sense of power comes from within, you don't need validation from the outside. That's what makes you unshakable. People often confuse peace with weakness. They think if you're not reacting, you're retreating. But in reality, peace is power under control. Peace is when you have every reason to clap back but choose not to. It's when you could expose, embarrass, or retaliate, but you don't because your character means more to you than your victory. That's not weakness. That's wisdom. And wisdom is what sustains power when the moment passes. There's a verse that says, a gentle answer turns away wrath. That doesn't mean you let people walk over you. It means you refuse to let their chaos contaminate your calm. Because when you lose your peace, you lose your power. When you let someone pull you into a lower vibration just to prove a point, you've already surrendered the upper hand. The true warrior doesn't fight. Every battle, they choose the ones that align with their purpose. Power without poison means you stop letting offense dictate your posture. It means you learn how to hold your ground without holding a grudge. It means you learn that sometimes silence speaks louder than shouting ever could. It means you value your energy so much that you don't waste it trying to convince people who are committed to misunderstanding you. Every showdown is an invitation to self-discovery. It reveals what's healed and what's still hurting. Because often when we respond with venom, it's not about the person, it's about the wound. They just happen to press a place we never fully healed. So before you respond, ask yourself, what part of me is being challenged right now, my spirit or my ego? If it's your ego, pause. Because ego reacts to protect its image, but spirit responds to preserve its integrity. Power without poison is about choosing integrity over impulse. It's when you decide that your response will represent your purpose, not your pain. It's when you refuse to let a temporary emotion make a permanent impression. It's realizing that some people aren't fighting you, they're fighting the reflection of their own insecurities that your confidence exposes. So instead of matching their energy, you elevate above it. There's a discipline in restraint that many never learn. We think if we don't respond immediately, we're losing ground. But sometimes waiting is the most strategic move you can make. Delay is not weakness, it's wisdom in motion. Because while others are speaking from reaction, you're responding from revelation. You're not operating off emotion, you're operating off vision. Power without poison also means you know when to disengage. Every battle isn't yours. Some showdowns are divine distractions, traps meant to pull you off your path. The enemy doesn't always show up as disaster. Sometimes he shows up as dialogue. You have to discern when engaging will cost you more than it's worth. Some people argue not to understand you, but to drain you. When you sense that, exit gracefully. Let your absence finish the conversation. Your presence already started. When you carry real power, you don't chase opportunities to prove it. You walk in rooms and the atmosphere shifts, not because you're loud, but because you're grounded. The more centered you are, the less reactionary you become. You start realizing that the only power that lasts is the kind that doesn't need to dominate others to feel whole. Power that lifts instead of crushes. Power that restores instead of retaliates. Power that leads with love, not pride. And love in its purest form is the antidote to poison. Love doesn't excuse wrong behavior, but it refuses to replicate it. Love says, I can correct you without cursing you. I can stand firm without stabbing back. When your power flows through love, it cleanses the moment instead of contaminating it. People will remember how you handled them in moments of conflict more than they'll remember the conflict itself. Your response becomes your legacy. In this world, it's easy to think that power means control, but in truth, it's the opposite. Power is the ability to stay centered when everything else is spinning. It's the art of standing tall without stepping on others. It's learning that the loudest person in the room isn't always the strongest. Often, it's the one who's mastered their silence. When you embody power without poison, you stop chasing approval and start commanding respect. You stop reacting to chaos and start setting the tone. You stop fighting to be seen and start walking like someone who knows they already are. Because when you're aligned with purpose, your presence carries its own authority. You don't have to force it. You don't have to manipulate it. You just walk in it. So the next time you find yourself in a showdown, pause. Breathe. Remember that your strength is not proven by how quickly you can clap back, but by how wisely you can respond. Don't let the moment pull you out of your character. Don't let someone else's insecurity make you act out of yours. Keep your power pure. Keep your heart clean, because the moment you add poison to your power, you've already lost. But when you keep your power rooted in peace, guided by wisdom, and grounded in love, that's when you win, even if you never have to raise your voice. That's when you walk away not just victorious, but evolved. That's power without poison. Clarity over combat is a mindset, a discipline of choosing understanding over reaction, truth over tension, and perspective over pride. In every showdown, whether it's between friends, partners, co-workers, or even nations, there's always a moment when confusion tries to take the wheel. That's the crossroads where peace or chaos is decided, because most conflicts aren't really about what was said, they're about what wasn't understood. When clarity becomes your goal, you stop fighting to win and start communicating to heal. Combat feels natural because it's instant. The ego loves a fight. It loves to be right, to defend, to dominate. Clarity, on the other hand, requires patience. It demands that you slow down long enough to listen, not just to what's being said, but to what's meant. That's what makes it powerful. Anyone can argue, very few can understand. Anyone can speak, very few can listen with humility. Choosing clarity over combat means you value resolution more than validation. In a showdown, emotions rise like a storm. Words get sharp. Tones get heavy. And suddenly both sides are fighting ghosts, assumptions, insecurities, projections. But if you could stop for just a second and ask, what are we really fighting about? Most of the time, it's not the thing on the surface. It's something deeper, a need to be seen, to be respected, to be heard. The battle isn't always against the person in front of you. It's often against the misunderstanding between you. When you lead with clarity, you're not afraid of silence. You use it as a tool because silence gives space for truth to breathe. Most people fear silence because they think it signals weakness or retreat. But in reality, silence is the birthplace of discernment. You can't hear wisdom when you're yelling. You can't receive revelation when you're reacting. Clarity begins when you quiet the noise, both around you and within you. Choosing clarity doesn't mean you avoid confrontation. It means you redefine it. You understand that confrontation isn't about tearing someone down. It's about pulling the truth out. It's not about who's right. It's about what's right. When you hold that posture, even your disagreements become productive. You start seeing showdowns as opportunities to strengthen relationships, not destroy them. Because when two people can face conflict and walk away with more understanding, that's not a loss, that's growth. Clarity over combat teaches you how to separate the person from the problem. It helps you see that your opponent isn't always your enemy. Sometimes they're your mirror. They reveal what's unhealed or unspoken inside you. When you get triggered, that's your spirit saying there's something here that still needs clarity. But instead of fighting the person, the wise thing to do is to fight for understanding, to fight for peace, not position. Too many people enter arguments with the goal of defeating instead of defining. They want to end the conversation, not elevate it. But clarity seeks truth even when truth is uncomfortable. It says, let's slow down. Let's unpack this. Let's figure out where this really started. It's not soft. It's strong. It takes strength to listen when you want to shout. It takes humility to admit, maybe I misunderstood. That's emotional intelligence at work, and that's what creates transformation, not trauma. When you operate from combat, your goal is to win the moment. When you operate from clarity, your goal is to win the relationship. Combat ends with bruised egos. Clarity ends with mutual respect. Combat leaves you drained. Clarity leaves you wiser. One feeds chaos, the other feeds growth. And the more you grow, the less you feel the need to fight for things that understanding can fix. There's a scripture that says, in all you're getting, get understanding. That's the foundation of clarity, because understanding bridges the gap between what's said and what's meant. Sometimes the loudest arguments come from people who actually want the same thing. They just don't know how to say it. A husband and wife both want love, but one fights for attention while the other fights for space. A boss and employee both want excellence, but one sees accountability while the other feels accusation. Without clarity, both think they're being attacked. With clarity, both realize they're on the same team. Clarity doesn't avoid truth. It refines it. It strips away assumptions, tone, and triggers until only the essence of the issue remains. Once you see that essence clearly, the path forward almost always reveals itself. The problem is that clarity requires humility, and humility is rare in the heat of conflict. That's why mastering it is so powerful. When you can pause mid-argument and say, help me understand what you meant by that, you shift the entire energy of the moment. You take the conversation from reaction to revelation. Choosing clarity over combat also means you take responsibility for your communication. It's easy to blame the other person for not understanding you, but have you spoken in a way that can be understood? Sometimes we hide behind big emotions or vague words and then get frustrated when others misinterpret us. Clarity asks you to be intentional, to say what you mean what you say, and say it with grace. That's not just good communication, that's leadership. Leadership shows up in conflict through composure. When everyone else is reacting, the leader listens. When everyone else is pointing fingers, the leader seeks solutions. When everyone else is offended, the leader stays objective. You can't lead what you're at war with. So if your goal is influence, choose clarity. Because influence doesn't come from volume, it comes from vision. Clarity is contagious. When you model it, others around you start to mirror it. The next time someone comes at you with heat, meet them with understanding. Ask questions instead of making accusations. What did you mean when you said that? Is there something I did that made you feel that way? You'll be surprised how quickly the temperature drops when people feel heard. Most hostility dissolves in the presence of genuine curiosity. There's also clarity with yourself, internal clarity. Because sometimes the external combat we experience is just a reflection of our inner confusion. If you don't know what you stand for, you'll fight for everything and stand for nothing. When your inner world is noisy, your outer world mirrors that noise. So before every showdown, check in with yourself. What do I actually want out of this? If you can't answer that clearly, you're not ready to engage. Clarity within creates calm without choosing clarity over combat doesn't guarantee that every situation will end perfectly. Some people aren't ready to meet you at that level of maturity, and that's okay. Your peace isn't dependent on their growth. You can still choose to walk in understanding, even if they insist on misunderstanding. Because clarity is not about control, it's about alignment. It's about staying true to your values, even intention. When you practice clarity long enough, you begin to see conflicts differently. You stop viewing them as threats and start seeing them as teachers. Each one shows you something about yourself, your patience, your triggers, your capacity to love under pressure. You realize that most showdowns aren't about destruction, they're about direction. They point you toward the next area of growth. And the clearer you get, the less chaos can find you. So in those moments when everything in you wants to react, breathe, ask yourself, am I seeking clarity or am I seeking combat? Because the one you choose determines the outcome you get. Combat may win the moment, but clarity wins the future. Combat may feed your pride, but clarity feeds your purpose. And purpose is what you're really fighting for, not victory, but vision. When you can look someone in the eye during conflict and still see their humanity, that's clarity. When you can hold your ground without hardening your heart, that's clarity. When you can walk away at peace, even if the other person doesn't get it, that's clarity. Because clarity isn't about agreement, it's about understanding. And once you understand, you no longer need to fight. That's the quiet power of choosing clarity over combat. It's how you turn confrontation into connection, arguments into alignment, and showdowns into stepping stones. It's how you stay rooted in truth when the world is shouting in noise. And it's how you prove not to them, but to yourself that wisdom will always win where war would only waste. Winning without wounding is one of the most overlooked principles in life because so often we equate victory with conquest. With leaving someone else defeated in our wake from a young age, society teaches us that to win, we must overpower, outsmart, or outfight others. But true victory doesn't require destruction. Winning without wounding is about achieving your goals, asserting your truth, and standing firm in your purpose, all while preserving the dignity and humanity of those around you. It's a mastery of self, a discipline of restraint, and a measure of emotional intelligence that separates the temporary champions from the lasting ones. At the heart of this principle is the understanding that people remember how you made them feel far longer than they remember what you said or did. When you win by tearing someone down, you may celebrate a momentary triumph, but you create scars that linger. Those scars breed resentment, mistrust, and distance. Even if you achieve your objective, the relational and emotional cost can outweigh the reward. Winning without wounding asks you to consider the impact of your actions, not just the outcome. It teaches that true power is measured not by how many you defeat, but by how many you uplift while pursuing victory. Showdowns, disagreements, and conflicts are inevitable. They are part of life. part of growth and part of human interaction. But the way we navigate them determines whether we leave devastation or deliver transformation. Winning without wounding is a choice, a conscious decision to rise above the instinct to hurt those who challenge us. It requires emotional control because in the heat of the moment, our instincts want to lash out, to humiliate, or to assert dominance. That is natural, but it is not wise. To win without wounding, we must pause long enough to engage with intention rather than reaction. One of the first steps toward this kind of victory is self-awareness. You have to know what triggers you, what wounds you carry, and what your emotional hot buttons are. When someone pushes against you, it's easy to interpret their words or actions as attacks against your character rather than challenges to your perspective. Winning without wounding requires that you step back and assess the situation objectively. Ask yourself, is this about proving them wrong or about protecting the truth? Is this about ego or about purpose? The answers guide your response and prevent you from leaving unnecessary emotional damage behind. Compassion is another cornerstone of this principle. When you see others as human beings with their own struggles, insecurities, and limitations, you approach conflict differently. Instead of aiming to humiliate or dominate, you aim to communicate, correct, and resolve. Compassion doesn't mean you compromise your standards or let people walk over you. It means you recognize the difference between defeating a bad idea and wounding a person. The former is necessary and productive. The latter is destructive and often counterproductive. Language is a critical tool in winning without wounding. Words have power. They can build up or break down, elevate or destroy. How you phrase your disagreement, correction, or challenge determines the emotional footprint you leave. When you focus on clarity, facts, and principles, rather than attacks or insults, you achieve your goal without causing unnecessary harm. For example, instead of saying, "You're wrong, and here's why," you can say, "Here's my perspective. I see it differently, and here's why." The subtle shift changes the dynamic from combative to collaborative, from adversarial to constructive. Winning without wounding also requires patience. Immediate reactions are often laced with heat, pride, or defensiveness, which tend to wound. By taking a step back, breathing, and giving both yourself and others time to reflect, you allow space for understanding. Sometimes the act of restraint itself is a victory. It shows maturity, discipline, and control. People respect someone who can hold their ground without resorting to aggression. In many cases, the silence of restraint speaks louder than the loudest victory achieved through attack. Boundaries play a crucial role in this process. Winning without wounding does not mean allowing abuse or compromise of your principles. It means standing firm in your boundaries while communicating them respectfully and clearly. It means saying no without shaming, disagreeing without demeaning, and correcting without condemning. Boundaries give structure to your interactions and protect both your integrity and the emotional well-being of those around you. When boundaries are enforced with grace, everyone wins and no unnecessary wounds are inflicted. Spiritual and moral grounding often guide the principle of winning without wounding. Many times, a showdown is more than just a clash of opinions. It's a reflection of deeper values. When your actions are aligned with your higher purpose or moral code, you operate from conviction rather than emotion. You are less likely to respond with anger, bitterness, or retaliation. Instead, your goal becomes resolution, integrity, and truth. Winning without wounding is not passive. It is deliberate, principled, and intentional. There is also a long-term perspective to consider. Showdowns and conflicts may feel urgent in the moment, but life is rarely defined by a single encounter. When you choose to win without wounding, you preserve relationships, reputations, and opportunities for future collaboration. You leave doors open rather than slamming them shut. You plant seeds of respect and credibility that can bear fruit later. People may forget the argument itself, but they will remember how you handled it, and that memory carries more influence than the argument ever could. Restraint and humility are allies in this process. Winning without wounding requires admitting that your victory does not need to be absolute or total. You don't have to crush every opposing voice to succeed. Sometimes allowing the other person dignity in defeat is the most strategic and powerful move. Humility doesn't diminish your strength, it demonstrates it. True strength is confident enough not to need to humiliate others to assert itself. Empathy further enhances this approach. Understanding where the other person is coming from, what they might be feeling, and why they are acting as they are allows you to respond in ways that minimize harm. Empathy doesn't excuse bad behavior, but it changes how you respond to it. When you respond with insight rather than instinct, you avoid leaving emotional scars and foster resolution. Empathy allows you to separate the person from the problem, addressing the issue without targeting the individual. Winning without wounding also requires reflection. After the showdown, examine your own behavior. Ask yourself if your words or actions cause unnecessary pain. Even when you win, there is value in evaluating how gracefully you did it. Reflection builds character and prepares you for future challenges. It ensures that victory doesn't come at the cost of your integrity or the trust of others. Every encounter becomes an opportunity to refine your approach, to strengthen your emotional intelligence, and to leave positive imprints even in conflict. In practical terms, winning without wounding can be applied in every area of life: relationships, work, negotiations, leadership, and even casual disagreements. It is the difference between being feared and being respected. People fear those who dominate through aggression, but they respect those who can assert themselves while maintaining dignity for all. Respect, unlike fear, builds loyalty, collaboration, and influence, all forms of victory that last long after the initial showdown. Ultimately, winning without wounding is about legacy. It's about the type of person you become in the process of achieving your goals. It's about proving that success does not require cruelty, that authority does not demand aggression, and that influence does not necessitate intimidation. Every time you choose to win with grace instead of force, you leave behind a model of integrity for others to follow. You demonstrate that real power is compassionate, purposeful, and enduring. The principle teaches us that the measure of victory is not in the spoils we collect, the arguments we win, or the people we dominate. The measure of victory is found in how cleanly we walk away, how intact we leave our relationships, and how much we grow through the process. True victory uplifts rather than diminishes. It clarifies rather than clouds. It strengthens rather than shatters. Winning without wounding is not easy. It requires discipline, patience, and emotional intelligence. But it is transformative. It allows you to achieve your goals while preserving peace, to assert your truth without creating enemies, and to grow in character while others may simply grow in spite. By choosing this path, you create victories that are not fleeting but lasting, not hollow but whole. In the end, winning without wounding is the ultimate art of mastery, the kind of triumph that leaves both you and those around you better, wiser, and stronger. So, what have we uncovered today? We've explored the art of navigating conflicts not as battles to be won, but as opportunities to reflect, grow, and lead with integrity. We've seen that power without poison is about holding your ground without compromising your character, standing firm in truth without allowing anger or ego to dictate your response. We've learned that clarity over combat transforms showdowns from chaos into understanding, teaching us to listen deeply, respond intentionally, and communicate with purpose rather than impulse. And finally, we've discovered that winning without wounding is the highest form of victory, achieving your goals, asserting your truth, and protecting your peace, all while preserving the dignity and humanity of those around you. Here's the truth. Life will constantly place you in moments of tension. People will challenge you, circumstances will test you, and conflicts will arise when you least expect them. But how you respond defines not just the outcome, but the person you become. Showdowns are not just tests of patience or strength, they are mirrors. They reveal your maturity, your priorities, and the depth of your character. And when you approach them with the principles we've discussed, you don't just survive the moment, you thrive beyond it. I want you to leave today remembering this. Victory is not about leaving others in the dust. Victory is about rising above the noise, protecting your peace, and creating an environment where truth and respect coexist. It's about mastering yourself in the midst of conflict and becoming the person who can face any showdown with grace, clarity, and power. So the next time life places you in a confrontation, ask yourself, am I responding with poison or with power? Am I reacting with anger or responding with clarity? Am I winning at the cost of someone else's heart or winning in a way that leaves everyone, including myself, whole? Master the etiquette of showdowns, and you master the art of life. Stand tall, speak truth, and walk away stronger without leaving wounds in your path. That is the legacy of true power, the mark of maturity, and the path to a life lived with integrity.